Retro.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the Armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's Monday, so we're kicking off the week with another Clone Wars discussion. But before we get into Anakin and Ahsoka's adventures, Jay, where can we be found on social media?
Well, you can find all of our adventures on Facebook and Instagram, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this will be our discussion of Cargo of Doom, which was episode 2 from season 2 of the Clone Wars. Again, it's pretty old, but it is a full spoiler discussion. So if you want to go watch it first and then come back and check out this discussion, then go do that. But with that out of the way, Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary of this episode, please?
Sure thing. Anakin and Ahsoka track Cad Bane down to the Deveron system and attack his fleet in the hopes of rescuing Jedi Master Bola Rapal and recovering the stolen Jedi holocron. However, in an attempt to get Bola Rapal to open the holocron, Cad Bane kills him while torturing him. He needs another Jedi and concocts a plan to get Anakin to open the holocron for him. Bane cleverly gets Ahsoka separated from Anakin after they invade his ship, and he threatens to flush her out an airlock unless Anakin opens the holocron for him. Anakin relents and does as he asks. As the episode ends, Anakin believes that Bane has been eliminated and the holocron destroyed, but it is all a clever ruse by Bane.
All right, so yeah, this is the second episode of the story arc that started last week with we discussed in our last episode where Bane stole the holocron from the Jedi Temple, and now he is going after Bola Rapal to get the crystal that he needs. What did you think about this one overall?
Well, I mean, the fortune cookie says it all. Overconfidence is the most dangerous form of carelessness. And I mean, we see that even in Anakin in this episode. I mean, there's a lot of carelessness going around, really, but it was just kind of a role reversal in a lot of ways from what we saw the last couple of episodes with Ahsoka kind of, going crazy. And she did a little bit of that too, but it was mostly Anakin and then Ahsoka turning it around on him and telling him to have patience. But I mean, also this episode was, we've talked about Clone Wars before as being, oh, it's a kid's show, but it's also very brutal. And I mean, from the, the torture and the death of Bola Rapal and, all of the different things that were going on and the threat, just as I just said in the summary of throwing Ahsoka out of an airlock and the way that he treated her, knowing that she's just a teenager, was, very cringy in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So this is obviously setting up a lot of other things to come and also showing us exactly how ruthless Bane can be. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty dark at times for sure.
Yeah.
But what about your thoughts?
Well, I like this episode a lot. It's very action oriented, and I'm thinking about the anti-gravity battle that happens in the hangar of the ship when Anakin, Ahsoka, and the clones corner him, and then he's got all the controls rerouted to his gauntlet, and he turns off the gravity, and so the droids are magnetically attach themselves to the floor, and so they're fine, but all the clones and the Jedi are floating around, and that's a fun battle. I like that. But yeah, like I said, I like this one a lot. I didn't feel like it was quite as deep as some of the episodes that we talked about with its themes that we've talked about lately. But I do want to talk a bit, since you brought it up, this whole torture and murder of Bola Rapal by Cad Bane. And that was the subject of the featurette that Dave Filoni did for this episode. And Dave said that, they never actually thought about pulling back from the level on this one because they needed the audience to understand that Cad Bane is a bad dude. That he has no compunction about killing people like this. He's got a job to do and he'll do it. And if that means he's murdering someone like Bowler Paul in the process, that's what he's going to do. And it makes it possible for the audience to believe that Ahsoka could actually die later in the episode.
Right.
But I was thinking about that before I saw the feature while I was watching the episode. And I'm like, I'm really glad I watched these with my kids when they were younger because they were pretty young. And yeah, to basically have Bola just tortured to death there. Now, it's not bloody. It's not like they're beating on him, but he's electrocuted to death there,
Right.
which only makes it marginally better, I suppose. But just and the way he dies, there's something about when a faceless clone or a droid is shot and falls apart or whatever. But this is a character again, not human still, but they are alive and then they go limp and die on that. I don't know, that just kind of stuck with me after I watched that.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, even the droids were, saying, "I don't know how much more this he's gonna be able to take,"
Uh-huh.
and they were even trying to be a little bit cautious about it,
Yeah.
and Bane was like, nope, we're not having that," and he was even not one bit remorseful about losing Bullet Paul. He was just like, "Well, guess we're just gonna have to find another Jedi."
Oh yeah, yeah. And he knew that two were coming, so
Yep.
that was no problem for him. One of the other things in this episode, Admiral Yularen, we've had a couple different opportunities to talk about him over the last several episodes, but he's got quite a bit of disdain for Anakin in this episode. I mean, he at one point he says, like, of all the Jedi, why did I have to get stuck with Skywalker on
Right.
this? And he's really put out with the way that Anakin is conducting the battle, his plans to land, which we'll cover in just a second, on the Separatist frigate that Bane's on. And there, and then later, he shows up in the hangar, is like, I thought I'd show up and see what I could do to help. Like he almost regrets it a little bit. But what did you make of Yularen?
Well, he's such a rule follower, and it's obvious that's why he's in the position that he is. And I think that he's still kind of getting used to the fact that they're working with Jedi to begin with and that they're kind of being thrown together. And yes, they've been working together for a little while now, but as far as the personality of Anakin versus himself, yeah, they're very opposite, but as you said, he's kind of starting to see, all right, I can understand, and maybe I was underestimating a little bit. And so, maybe it's a little bit of Yularen's overconfidence in his own judgment about things that was part of where that fortune cookie came from as well.
Yeah, but at the end of the episode, he's kind of chastising Anakin because
Mhm.
they didn't save Bowler Paul and they didn't retrieve the holocron.
Mhm.
And they don't have like Bane's body or anything like that. So although the mission was technically a success because as far as they know, Bane didn't get away with the holocron, it was destroyed. It was not that if it was a video game, like it's achievements that you're unlocking here for
Yeah.
accomplishing various mission goals, and you can still complete the mission without getting the doing everything, but those are like bonus objectives that you get more points for, and that's what the situation was here. The they didn't rescue Bola or Paul, but Bane didn't get away with the holocron as far as they knew, and so it was a victory, and Anakin just kind of flippantly says, "Yeah, but it was still a victory," because of that reason there. And because, but little you know that Bane was alive and on his ship. But still,
Right.
I get that different people write these episodes, and there's different directors for these episodes, with Dave Filoni as the supervising director over everything on it. But kind of after the Storm over Ryloth episode, where Ahsoka acted recklessly and there was this confidence in Anakin's leadership then. This kind of seemed to be a 180 that I wasn't expecting. So, I mean, I guess it's possible this took place before that. I haven't checked the timeline or anything recently, but it seemed a little bit of backsliding for Yularen in his relationship with Anakin here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he recognizes Anakin's skills, and
Mhm.
obviously he's very unorthodox in the way that he does things. I mean, you're looking at military versus Jedi. So you're looking at someone who, like I said, is by the book, very rule follower, that has to work with someone who has these mystical powers and a very different way of doing things. And Anakin himself is very different from many other Jedi anyways. So and Anakin
Yeah.
is just kind of like free spirited and out there. And so it's yeah, I could see where it's very challenging for him.
I don't necessarily think he's wrong in all of this. It's just
Right,
that
sure.
it's compared to their past. What we've seen there, it's just like they seem to work together better before this. So at any rate, um, moving on, Anakin very efficiently destroys the Separatist fleet there at Deveron, and they figure out that the one ship that's trying to get away is the one that Cad Bane must be on, and so they disable its hyperdrive, and now they have to board it. The only problem is they don't have any landing craft that are capable of doing that, or boarding craft. And so Anakin comes up with a great idea of using the ATTEs. They're just going to drop them out of the hangar onto the top of Cad Bane's frigate, and that's how we're going to transport all the clones over to that ship. And this is one of the things Yularen is mad about, because the ATTs aren't rated for that. But Rex is all excited about it. It's like, yeah, they've got magnetize the feet so they'll stick. I think this is a really cool scene, and it's a really cool idea. There's one flaw: there's no gravity that would pull those ATTEs out
Thank you. Right. I was
onto that
thinking the
Separatist
same
frigate.
thing.
So
Because they did a better job inside the ship itself with
mhm.
the zero gravity battle than they did on the outside of the ship.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to get nitpicky, but they could have solved that problem by just saying, we're going to use such and such as a propellant to launch us out of this hangar towards their ship. And that would have been all they needed to do, is some line like
Mhm.
that. But instead, they just dropped them. And but again, I get it. Star Wars is a space opera. We have explosions in space, sound in space, and we don't in real life. So if we can forgive that, we should be able to forgive this. But it was just hard not to overlook that while I was watching the episode again today.
Yeah. But, I guess that just adds to its charm.
The other thing about that scene is the attire that Anakin and Ahsoka had.
Mhm.
Anakin was essentially in his robes with a helmet, and Ahsoka went from her two-piece outfit to a bodysuit with a helmet, and that was supposed to protect her from the void and the lack of oxygen in space.
Yeah, and it was made from, like, crushed velvet. I know, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, well, at
Yeah.
least it's a step up, but it's still not quite there.
Well, I could not find this, and I looked really hard, but it reminded me of a comic cover from the classic Marvel series, which I'm pretty sure had Han Solo outside his ship and basically his regular clothes with like a fishbowl helmet over his head, shooting his
Mhm.
blaster at somebody. And I really, really wanted to find that and put it in our notes, but I couldn't. But look, I get it. They have limited resources for creating new models, and so there's only so much they can do on the budget that they had. But I don't know. I would like to see a little bit more. I think with regard to that. I think that's my biggest issue with this episode overall.
Mhm. No, I would agree. Yeah, it was a little rough.
Yeah. So once they're there, Cad Bane has all the controls for the ship rerouted to his gauntlet, and he's engaged the self destruct. So he's ready to blow up the ship when he needs to. And this leads to a battle in the across the ship. He leaves the bridge by jumping through some ductwork just in time for the Jedi to show up and take out the droids. Great scene. It makes me chuckle every time. Anakin is approaching three battle droids, and one of them's like, hey, there's three of us and only one of him. And then the one battle droid just gets depressed and kind of slumps over. It won't matter. And then meanwhile,
Right,
the
he
third
just
battle droid's in the background, panicking, trying to put the codes in to open the door and get out of there. But it ultimately ends up with them fighting in the hangar and that fight where there's no gravity that I was talking about. That's like one of the standout moments for me. of this entire
Mhm.
thing. I mean, I love the ATTEs, even though the gravity issue was there, but just the creativeness of this scene was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and there was so much trust between Anakin and Ahsoka with everything that was going on and the way that they were trying to maneuver throughout this
Uh-huh.
entire, sequence of things too.
Yeah, yeah, and just when Anakin's about to get his hands on the holocron, R2D2 turns the gravity back on, and so they all go crashing down to the deck, and then the holocron falls out of his grasp, and Cad Bane does that swipe and kind of like almost poses with it in front of Anakin, like, "Haha, I got this. You want this,
Mhm.
Jedi?" Uh, and then they also throw some other hurdles in there, like one of those shells falls out of its whatever was holding it, and they have to be careful not to shoot it so they don't blow up the entire hangar with them in
Right.
there. So a lot of thought, I think, went into that scene, and I think it really paid off.
No, I agree.
Yeah. But this leads to really, one of the big climaxes of the episode, and Bane takes off. He runs off with the holocron. Anakin and Ahsoka are going to go in pursuit, but Ahsoka doesn't wait for Anakin. She goes charging off, even though Anakin's behind her. Like, Ahsoka, wait, we'll confront them together, or words to that effect. And lo and behold, Cad Bane gets a drop on her, basically gets her shackled up and behind a um, uh, energy field, and so he's threatening to flush her out of the airlock unless Anakin agrees to open up the holocron. And Ahsoka is pleading with him not to do it because once he does that, then Cad Bane will have all the information he needs to find any force-sensitive child in the galaxy. Okay, you kind of mentioned this in your overall thoughts about it, but again, I'm not going to get on Ahsoka's case too much about this because this was overzealous in the moment. It wasn't like the orders that she disobeyed at Ryloth or on Felucia, where she's got people telling her no, come back, and she's openly saying, cool your jets, Admiral,
Yeah.
or Master Skywalker told me when you got the tennies on the run, you don't let them go. She's running. I don't know if she even heard Anakin in that moment, but what did you think about her kind of that act of disobedience?
Well, I think, big part of this is that she's, as we've said before, she's learning from his lead. And I think that at least trying to start to balance her own sense of independence and problem solving with trying to emulate what Anakin expects from her. And, she is getting obviously a lot more independence and sometimes overconfidence, but she's also understanding what her role is in the dynamic between the 2 of them, and she actually is the one that, kind of holds Anakin back in some ways too from overreacting and rushing into things, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm willing to give her a pass on this one because I'm not sure she even heard Anakin in her pursuit of Cad Bane, but you you make mention of how she's learning from Anakin, and I get it. He's been reckless in the past, and that's quite the mentor to have. But we do have two recent instances where Anakin and others just told her to do something different that are not what you would expect Anakin to do. Again over Ryloth and again on Felucia, and so it's like, well, Ahsoka, you've just recently twice had it pointed out to you that this is not the way to do things. And
Mhm.
so you keep using that as an excuse for her, I think. Um,
Oh, I agree.
yeah, but growing pains, fine. She's a teenager or thereabouts.
Mm.
Um, so
One
did
thing
you
I will say
go
real
ahead?
quick though is that, Anakin, as we've seen before, he's ruled by his emotions.
Hmm.
And as much as Ahsoka is emotional, I think for her, it's a lot more trying to prove that she can do something. But I mean, we've seen, and even in this episode, with the fact that he knew that if he wasn't going to do this for Bane, that Ahsoka was going out the airlock. And
Hmm.
yes, that's duty, but it's also emotion.
Yeah, watching this one though is like, because what did he say to her is like, because she's pleading with him not to do it, that it's too dangerous. And he says, "Yeah, I'll do what you want." And he gets down to that meditative pose, and then he opens the holocron with the Force. Bane puts the crystal in, then he can find the kids now. But Anakin's like, we can get it back. And I don't know. I think for me, I thought he was a little bit more balanced in this episode, which is there is the no attachment thing to do, which might have been to sacrifice Ahsoka in that moment, and then figure out how to deal with the consequences of that, official, mental, emotional afterwards. But he also saw a way out, which is I can open this that saves Ahsoka's life now, and I can get that holocron back. So maybe there's a bit touch of recklessness in there, but I didn't. But I also kind of saw. I don't know. He didn't seem quite so angry as we can see him at times when he's really losing it about the people that are dear to him, like when Padme's trapped in the bunker on Naboo when the blue shadow virus has been released and the
Right.
like.
Right.
So
Yeah, I just can't. I know I'm belaboring this point, but I just can't help but to think about how much there's almost somewhat of a moral dilemma even going on here. What he's sacrificing all of the names of these children for his Padawan. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so and that's kind of where I was getting with that, is that
no,
it's
you're
kind of a
right.
tipping point, because it kind of shifts the moral stakes of the mission in a lot of ways.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the things I think Yularen was so irritated about.
Yeah.
That was a very valuable thing that they gave up there for so many reasons. But again, it was Anakin believed that he was going to get that back, and he could do
Mhm.
both things. And for him, it wasn't, I am going to open this for Cad Bane and save Ahsoka, and Cad Bane is getting away. Anakin had Bane trapped on this ship because what the next thing he does is he says, he tells the soldiers, get down to the hangar and destroy all the escape pods because he
Mhm.
believes he's got Cad Bane captured in this case. And then, and he ends the episode believing he was right because Bane staged his own death.
Right.
He took over the one clone's armor and dressed up the clone in his clothes. And then, as Anakin watched this clone shoot Cad Bane, and Cad Bane fall to his doom. So,
Mhm.
yeah. But at any rate, so there's that. Yeah, so they make their escape, they get back to the cruiser, they have the confrontation with Yarn that I was talking about here, and that sets up the episode we got coming up next time where Cad Bane does get away with the holocron, and they have to deal with the aftermath of that. But any other thoughts on this before we start to wind it up?
Well, of course, it's always great to see Cad Bane in
Mhm.
action, and, the way that he uses his cunning and his prowess to kinda, do whatever it takes to succeed, and also just, again, how ruthless he actually is.
Mhm.
And as you said, it wasn't necessarily as deep of an episode in terms of pushing all of the things forward that we've been seeing so far, but I think, like, as we were talking about it, when you read between the lines a little bit, there's actually a lot to unpack.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, it's a good one, and um, this is a good trilogy of episodes that we're in the middle of right now because
Yeah.
the some are better than others. I mean, we'll get to other episode arcs that are 3 or 4 episodes that aren't quite as good later, and I think this season's pretty solid, but in some of the later seasons. But this is a good story, start to finish, across the 3
Mhm.
episodes, and I like what they've done with it. So okay, well then that will do it for this episode of Podcast Stardust on our discussion of this episode of the Clone Wars, Cargo of Doom. I love the way they name these things. This is like George Lucas
Yeah.
written all over it. I mean, that's the serial method that he liked, for the movie titles as well. But I digress. We hope you've enjoyed the episode. And if you did and you want to get our ongoing discussions of the Clone Wars, then please make sure you subscribe to Podcast Artists on your podcatcher of choice. And after you've done that, we'd greatly appreciate it if you would rate and review the show. And that is something that helps others find it. And if those are on Apple Podcasts, then I'll try and remember to get your review and read it here on the show, especially if it's 5 stars. If you want to find more podcast artists, then of course your podcatcher should have the last 1 or 200 episodes. But beyond that, we have another 857 that are out there. And the best place to find those is retrozap.com. You can find our review of the entirety of Rebels, The Bad Batch, all the other series that have come out since 2019. We've covered everything here on Podcast Artists, and we've got our annual movie that we discuss in 10-minute segments over the course of the year. So there's a lot to find with Podcast Stardust over on richesapp.com. And of course, you can find all the other great shows that are on the Riches App Podcast Network there as well. Jay, you want to go ahead and give those social media contacts to our listeners one more time and let them know where else we can found on the internet?
Absolutely. So we are very easily found at Podcast Stardust on all of your social media outlets, including Instagram and Facebook. And we are also on Pinterest. So if you are interested in finding some fun ideas for everything Star Wars, you can head over there. And we also have our 2 YouTube outlets. So we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And those also support ratings and reviews. So we'd love to see it. And another thing we'd love to see is you sporting some Podcast Stardust swag out in the wild. So if you are ready to snag some items, you can head over to TeePublic, and the link to that is in our show notes. And if you do happen to get something, be sure to snap a picture and tag us on our social media. And we just thank you in advance because every one of those purchases does help to support the show.
Okay, why don't you remind everybody what's going on in cosplay?
Well, as usual, you can find me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, and I will be at Fan Expo Cleveland here in a couple weeks. And I was very tickled to be featured in one of their emails about promoting cosplay at Fan Expo Cleveland. So that was a really great thing. And you can always catch me as Ahsoka, the Fourth Sister, Hera, 2 different versions, as well as my original concept Mandalorian, Leia, sometimes in between there as well. And I also have some new non-Star Wars things coming up as well. So once again, check that out at j.snipscosplay.
Okay, here's our schedule for the next few episodes. On Wednesday, we are going to take a look at Ewoks, The Battle for Endor. This is the made-for-TV movie that came out in 1985. It's going to be fun. Make sure you join us for that. And then on Friday, we end the week with a look at some recent Star Wars news. So thanks for listening to episode 858 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be